Joe Douglas speaks. He spoke at the NFL Combine today, and we've got some tampering charges also coming up when it comes to the New York Jets. We're going to discuss all of that today on a Wednesday edition of Football with Faria.
It's time for Football with Faria.
You got to get the offense right, and you got to be able to be aggressive. They put up 14 against the secondary. That is driving me up a freaking wall right now.
Now here's your host, Nick Faria.
All right, welcome inside Football with Faria today. For those of you jumping on for the first time, welcome. For those coming back, welcome back. Like, share, subscribe, do whatever you need to do on YouTube. If you guys want to call in, the description is in YouTube, that YouTube description down below. Call in. We'll try to answer all of your questions throughout today's show. Also, join the live chat. We'll try, like I said, to answer all the questions that you have. But there's a lot to talk about today. A lot of topics. Joe Douglas spoke at the NFL Combine today. We have a couple of different players speaking out, some former Jets speaking out about what's going on with the organization. And we have to start with the tampering charge. I mean, holy crap. We have to start there. Mecole Hardman, former wide receiver of the New York Jets, was traded to Kansas City. What was it, week 5, week 6? Didn't really see the field at all. He had one catch for 6 yards with the New York Jets. And I think a lot of people throughout the first quarter of the season was wondering where the heck Mecole Hardman was, because the Jets offense was so anemic pretty much the entire year. But through those first 6 games, they really needed some big play opportunities, and they just didn't come. And a lot of people sort of tied that with Mecole Hardman, and he just didn't see the field. Offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett continued to say that it was more about the number of plays that were being dealt. But Hardman right away comes out at the end of the year. He has just won the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Jets do right by him by trading him to the team of his choice. They do right by him by saying, okay, Mecole, we don't have a role for you. We were surprised at how well Xavier Gipson has looked as a returner. We will ship you to your prime destination. Where do you want to go? You want to go to Kansas City? That's fine. Have a great life. So the Jets essentially allow Mecole Hardman to be traded to Kansas City. He goes and catches the game-winning touchdown pass in Super Bowl 58. You would think that both parties would understand that it just didn't work out and it's safe to move on. You would think that that would be the case, but Mecole Hardman did not do that. On the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, the podcast that the ESPN host has been doing with former players, he went out and Mecole Hardman spoke candidly about what didn't work with the New York Jets, and he essentially trashed everyone. He trashed the offensive system and the fact that they weren't prepared for when Aaron Rodgers went down. There's no system. Everyone was trying to learn on the fly, and the coaches kind of gave up. We've kind of heard similar reports throughout the offseason about the offense just not being in sync and not being prepared enough. So I think many people will understand that Hardman may not be so outlandish in regards to that. But then he started talking about the reason why he was traded. And then he started continuing to say that he was contacting the Kansas City Chiefs while he was an employee of the New York Jets, saying, "Come and get me." That is a legitimate quote that Mecole Hardman used on the Pivot podcast. He said it on the show. And that should have alarm bells everywhere, because that is tampering in the National Football League. Players cannot communicate with other organizations while they are still under contract unless they have been given the authority to seek a trade. And I think we saw it today with Joe Douglas. Mecole Hardman was not allowed to seek a trade when he was contacting the Kansas City Chiefs. And crazily enough, Hardman then tweets after the show, after people started recognizing, wait a minute, that's tampering. The Chiefs should be docked a draft pick, as is usually the code with tampering charges. Hardman then goes on Twitter and says, it never happened that way. Absolutely not. But you can't backtrack what you said. All you did was you've implicated yourself and Kansas City. You didn't like where you were in New York. You wanted to go to a place that you were comfortable in, and you did everything in your power to push them to that point. That is tampering. And it blows my mind that Hardman would even consider talking about it in that light. The Jets traded you to the destination of your choice. They did right by you. But because it's the Jets and you want to get a joke in, you've implicated yourself and your team? If you're the Chiefs now, why do you re-sign him? He cost you a draft pick. He has costed you, whether it's a third, fourth, or fifth round pick. That is astronomical stupidity. It blew my mind when I heard it. I was writing about it yesterday on Sports Illustrated, and I truly, truly could not believe what I was writing. And again, some of the stuff that Mecole Hardman said, I think most people will agree with. The offense wasn't prepared. The coaching staff was inadequate. There were a lot of different issues. I think some people will disagree with the conversations about Boyer, because Boyer has been a terrific special teams coach. And Mecole Hardman being the only player to have a problem with Boyer seems more like sour grapes. A guy that's upset that he got benched for an undrafted rookie. But outside of that, I think a lot of people can understand his frustration. He was a guy that they signed in the offseason to be an integral part of this offense, and they simply didn't use him. And it's not like they used other players over him. They threw out Garrett Wilson. They threw out Alan Lazard. I was there, guys. I was there at practice. I was there in these conversations. I was there watching the games. They just refused to play him. And it didn't make any sense to me. And in that light, I can completely understand why Hardman would be frustrated. Any player, I think, would be frustrated. And any player would ask to be traded in that instance. Listen, you guys don't have a role for me. That's fine. Trade me to a different spot, please, because I want to help a contender. Nothing wrong with that. But he comes out and goes after other people. After these people. And I couldn't understand it. I could not understand it. I still don't. It really is the most ridiculous story I have really seen in quite some time. We talk about the tampering charges last year with Arizona and Philly. This takes the cake. Arizona was contacting defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon during the Super Bowl, and Gannon was allowing it. That was tampering. This is a player who has caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. He is on cloud nine as you could possibly be. And because he wants to get a joke in with the Jets, he has now implicated himself and his organization for tampering. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. What other team is going to want to take him now? What other team? It's absolute insanity. And Joe Douglas, in his right mind, and he was absolutely right to do it, he said, we're aware of it. The conversation, the comments made there resonated with the team. That was his exact quote. And when he says that, I think that's a real sign that the Jets will be looking towards the NFL to see if they will be hit, the Kansas City Chiefs, with tampering. Because based on Mecole Hardman's comments, that is tampering. 1,000%. That's a letter of the law. You cannot contact players from an opposing team while they are still under contract, unless they are given permission. And we're going to get to some of the takeaways of the combine. But one difference, notice the difference, Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is being allowed to facilitate and seek a trade. Joe Douglas announced it today. No one's surprised. No one is shocked by the move. Everyone expects Wilson to be moved this offseason in some capacity, whether it's by trade or release. But the Jets are allowing him to seek a trade. Based on Douglas's comments, based on Mecole Hardman's comments, that did not happen in that case. Hardman opened up the conversation with that. And it blew me away. It blew me away. He's implicated himself and the organization, pretty much the only organization that would probably re-sign him. The only one. What other team is going to sign him? He threw his organization under the bus. It's absolute insanity. Insanity. Just crazy. First 10 minutes of the show here. Football with Faria. Thank you guys so much for jumping on. We're going to get to some of your questions in just a little bit, but first, I do want to talk about the biggest takeaways from Joe Douglas's media availability today. He spoke at Indianapolis. He did mention that Robert Saleh was going to be in attendance at the Combine on Saturday and Sunday. I thought that was very interesting and very good because I believe Saturday and Sunday, those are the offensive line drills. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's good that he's going to be available for some of those things. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but him just being around there will certainly help. It's not the be-all, end-all, and if he didn't show up, it's not the end of the world. But it's nice to have him there and work with Douglas and make sure they are on the same page of what particular prospects they want. But some of the other big takeaways were pretty significant. We have Bryce Huff. The Jets are not going to franchise tag him. Again, that's not really a surprise. It's not a surprise. I think everyone expects Douglas to hit the open market. The one caveat we saw yesterday, for those of you that have watched Jake Asman's show, Connor Hughes of SNY mentioned that Bryce Huff's market may not be as big as he may want or expect. Think about that. The Jets don't have to franchise tag him. The franchise tag is $22 million for a single year. That's a lot of money to be dishing out. But if the Jets have heard what Connor Hughes has said and what some outside the organization have heard, Bryce Huff may not be getting the kind of contract he was wanting. And that's a perfect situation for the Jets. I wrote about it yesterday on Sports Illustrated. You guys can take a look at jetscountry.com. But overall, the comparison of Huff, I have said for weeks now, and you guys can quote me on this. I've been saying this for a while. The comparison that I continue to throw out with Bryce Huff in a contract, it was always Hassan Reddick. Reddick signed a 3-year, $45 million deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. 3-year, $45 million for a premium pass rusher at a nice, solid age. He was, 27 when he signed that deal? That is in the middle of your prime, and he only got $15 million a year. The NFL has concerns about Bryce Huff's ability to defend the run. He played it a lot better this year. There's no denying that. He was much better this year against the run. But there's still some concerns, and there are concerns that his efficiency may not be as strong when he gets more snaps. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the role that you are in is the perfect role for you. The third down elite pass rusher that can get after the quarterback. That's also a possibility. So if we're to believe Connor Hughes, and I've said this before, that is certainly something that needs to be taken into account, Huff may not get the $20 million that he's looking for. He might not. And if you're the Jets and you have to increase the conversation maybe to $15, $16 million, I think that's a legitimate contract offer that you can give Bryce Huff because you want to keep the homegrown talent. And Joe Douglas kind of alluded to that today. He kind of said, listen, we'd love to have him, but we're going to let him hit the open market and see what else is out there. That's essentially what Douglas said, and he's not wrong. If you're doing right by a player, you let him test the open market. That's exactly what the Eagles are doing with Hassan Reddick now, and that's what other teams are doing as well. It is not out of craziness that the Jets are doing this, that they're letting him walk, because all they can look back and say, hey, you get your best deal and you tell us and we'll see if we can match. That's the conversation. Nothing wrong with Joe Douglas saying that. And if we look at the top of the list of needs or sort of important issues that the Jets need to solve, Bryce Huff's contract is number one, and number two is the offensive line. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Bryce Huff. He's your best free agent, your best pending free agent going into the market. But then after that, once you figure out what's going to happen, you got to position and pivot to the offensive line. And Douglas kind of alluded to this as well. He mentioned the Laken Tomlinson move being strictly a cap casualty. The move saves the Jets $8 million. It's really a no-brainer when you think about it. But now it opens up a third different position of need. And the one player that he alluded to that they talked about a lot today at the Combine is, if you're looking at the Jets offensive line, you can move Elijah Vera Tucker pretty much anywhere. He can play left guard, right tackle. And I think what the Jets are doing is they are trying to wait and see what they can do in free agency. Because while this free agent class is not very strong at tackle, it's very strong at guard. Kevin Zeitler, Dotson, Owenwu. There's a lot of good quality guards in free agency. And if that means the Jets stay at 10 in the NFL draft, move Elijah Vera Tucker to right tackle, and have the likes of, let's say, Dotson and Zeitler at guard. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think that's kind of a pipe dream for some because it's going to be a lot of money. But that makes a lot of sense if you're the Jets, no? You move Vera Tucker to tackle to allow this deep class, this deep free agent class of guards to come in and want to be here. And there's going to be players that want to play with Aaron Rodgers. This is something that we keep forgetting. There are going to be receivers that want to play with Aaron Rodgers. There's going to be offensive linemen that want to be a part of success. They are not going to look at 2023 as the barometer to stay away from the Jets. They're going to look at it as, well, Aaron Rodgers is back, and we should try to get a ring. And with Aaron Rodgers, when you have a top 5 quarterback of all time, you better make sure that you're on that side. That's what a lot of people are going to be deciding in free agency. And that's why it's so important that Aaron Rodgers is going to try to be around to help the organization, as Joe Douglas has mentioned. Elijah Vera Tucker, they still have to make a decision on whether they're going to activate his 5th-year option. I think it's a no-brainer. I think the Jets should and need to hit on that 5th-year option with AVT. He's essentially your top player from that draft class. You need to keep him in New York. Forget the injuries the last 2 years. The last 2 years have been freak injuries that have unfortunately ended his season early. You don't get players like Elijah Vera Tucker on your offensive line like this. And when you do, you need to lock him up long term. You need to. So I fully expect the Jets to put the 5th-year option on him. And then it's going to allow them to be aggressive and being able to be versatile in free agency. They're going to be able to sign a couple of guards. They may even be able to sign one of the top tackles of this free agent class. I don't think anything's out of the picture just yet. Not at all. There's so many different options that they can go. So many different options. Let's get to some of your questions here. Dan, the Jets fan, first one up today. Nick, how much of a say do you think Woody Johnson has in regards to JD being aggressive in terms of giving up draft capital for next year? He can't be spending draft capital that a new GM would need. Dan, this is a very good question. And I truly believe that Woody Johnson is of the opinion that he believes the Jets are going to be successful in 2024. He has trust in Douglas and Saleh. He believes that this is the staff to take and end this 13-year playoff drought. And because of that, he is essentially saying to Douglas, do everything in your power to end this drought this year. So I certainly think the 2025 second-round pick is going to be up for auction. There is going to be conversations about the Jets trading into the second round this year, because I think Woody Johnson trusts this current staff enough to essentially say, do whatever you need to do. We've learned our lesson. We need a backup quarterback. We need offensive linemen. Do what you need to do to build a winner. That's what's probably going on in Johnson's mind. And I will say, to defend Johnson a little bit, not saying a lot, but a little bit, the Jets had the second most money dished out to the active roster last year. The second most. I think it was something around, $180 million of contracts that year that they had to pay. It was absurd. It was an absurd number. And if Johnson made the decision, I don't want to do anything else, we are going to ride the roster we have. That's on him. But they went all in kind of last year. They went all in on some of the wrong players, but they really went all in to try and get this thing right. And it didn't go right because 4 plays into the opener, everything went to crap. But to say that Johnson won't allow JD to be aggressive, I think is going to be wrong, because I think the Jets are going to have one of the more aggressive off seasons in franchise history. I really do. Let's get to another question. Antonio, the entire training camp was preparing for how Rodgers wants the offense to function. Of course, there were going to be problems once he went down, like the old offensive coordinator of the Colts said, we don't practice. Yeah, listen, I'm going to say this because I feel that this is becoming more of a joke. And I don't really like it because I think there's a lot of stupid people out there, and there's a lot of quality sports reporters that are kind of getting into this trap. Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame quarterback, yes? If we all agree that Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame quarterback, then we should know that any team that has an ability to acquire a player of that stature should do everything in their power, not just to bring him in, but to bring him into a system that he is comfortable with. Bringing in guys like Randall Cobb and Lazard and Billy Turner. And we can argue all day long about if it was right to give Rodgers the key to the entire kingdom. But that's what the Bucs did with Tom Brady. That's what the Broncos did with Peyton Manning. You know what's the only difference between those 3 situations? Rodgers was the one that didn't play. To sit here and say that the Jets were wrong to put the entire offense in Rodgers' hands is just factually incompetent, because that's what every team does. Do you honestly think the Kansas City Chiefs do not run an offensive structure based on the skill set of Patrick Mahomes? And they have Andy Reid. Are the Chiefs still a dominant team without Patrick Mahomes on the roster? Probably not. Are the Bills still a contender in the AFC without Josh Allen? Absolutely not. You channel your offense, you channel everything to fit your quarterback. It is not outlandish to do so. It's not some stupid idea to do so. The only problem the Jets had is the fact that Rodgers got hurt. If he was healthy and they went 7-10, then those conversations can happen. Then you can say, well, you paid a guy $30 million a year, a 40-year-old quarterback. What did you expect? You can't expect that for a guy that has been durable and healthy for the majority of his career. It was always the right move to make, and it was always the right move to bring in his guys. The problem is it didn't work out immediately when he went down. Plain and simple. John Gunning, my question is what they will do with Mekhi Becton. Do they try to sign him on a team-friendly deal, or do they let him go to another team? John, great question here. I will say with Mekhi Becton, I know a lot of people on the Jets beat believe that he is going elsewhere, but I truly believe that there's going to be a little bit of a reckoning here for Becton in free agency. I don't think that Mekhi is going to get the deal he wants. And I truly feel that if the Jets are interested in having him as a swing tackle, they could come in with a deal that's more team friendly and will allow Mekhi to just grow at each tackle position. Now, am I saying that that's going to happen? No, because a team can swoop in and say, we're going to give you starting tackle money right away. Titans can do it. They tried it with that Andre Dillard, and it failed miserably, but they might try again. With Mekhi, though, you need to make sure that you have a swing tackle. No matter if you move AVT to right and draft Olu Fashanu or whatever, you need to be able to have depth. And I know a lot of people in the building like Carter Warren. A lot of people outside, including myself, love the prospect that he is. I think Carter Warren has tremendous upside. I think he could be a very solid player. Do I think that he should be given the keys to the starting lineup? Absolutely not. Do I think he should be given the keys to the swing tackle spot? No. He needs to prove himself. But there's a lot of upside there, and I think he can be successful. So maybe the Jets look at Carter and say, we don't need to sign Mekhi Becton anymore. We're going to let him walk, and we're not even going to offer him a new deal. Maybe that's a possibility as well. Dane, do we have to pursue compensation, or is it in the league hands? So I'm not sure entirely how it goes. Based on what I remember from the tampering charges with Philadelphia and Arizona, Philadelphia sent those accusations over to the league and asked them to investigate. The league investigated, and the Eagles and Cardinals were either docked a pick or the Eagles were awarded a pick, something like that. There was a trade that was made that gave Philly an extra draft pick from Arizona, and that was essentially the deal, the matter is over. The tampering charges are no longer filed. So I think that the Jets are going to have to publicly put it out there that they are looking at tampering charges. And if I were them, I would. I absolutely would. Comment here from Jared. To me, it demonstrated an entitled attitude. He lacks the earned, not given attitude. I listen, I don't know if it's about his attitude overall. I just thought it was incredibly stupid. I thought it was incredibly stupid because he is a pending free agent. He is not on the Kansas City Chiefs roster as of the new league year in a couple of weeks. And you have now essentially, potentially, have costed them a draft pick because you wanted to run your mouth and make the Jets the butt of the joke. What are you doing? What are you doing? It's stupidity to me. Absolute stupidity to me. And it's not so much the, okay, he was trying to get some stuff off his chest and he said that as a joke. He didn't really actually mean it. But he should know the rules. That is clear tampering. And the NFL has cracked down on that in recent years. You cannot negotiate with a player on a roster and sign to a deal. It was absurd to me. Absurd. Good question here from Antonio. Do you agree with Connor Hughes' assessment of Huff's value? I don't know if I agree with the assessment that he heard where the contract was going to be around 12 to 14 million. I think it's going to be somewhere around Reddick and maybe even a little higher, 15, 17 million. I don't think he's going to get 22 million. I don't think he's going to beat the franchise tag per year annual value. And again, it's not to say that Huff's a bad player. I think he's a tremendous player with tremendous upside. But is he a top 5 defensive player in the NFL? No. Is he a top 10 defensive player in the NFL? Or at least at his position? And I would still say no. I really would. Look, I love the guy. He's incredibly athletic. He's got a lot of upside. But I'm not paying him $22 million per year. I'm looking to see if that number can come down. So I think there's going to be a team that increases the value a little bit and tries to get close to 20. And Connor Hughes has essentially said that he's going to the highest bidder. And of course, I agree with that. But is he going to get 22, 23 million, maybe even 25? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. From Dane, if there's a term as system quarterback, then Huff is far and away a system sacker. This is where I don't agree. I don't agree that he's a system sacker, stuff like this, because how many guys in this league now get 10 plus sacks a year? And I'll alter that as well. How many players on a defensive line that has the value of sending different players in waves? The Jets have it where it's not just one group of defensive linemen, it's multiple that come at you in waves every other play. Everyone's fresh late in the game because there's so many different rushers on the field. That's not what I'm saying about Huff. What I'm saying is his value as an efficient rusher is fantastic. And that's something that teams are going to have to talk to themselves about and say, okay, This guy hasn't really been a 3-down lineman his entire career. If we pay him this money, we expect him to be a 3-down defensive end. Is that going to be the case? And I think some of the organizations are going to say no to that answer. Another question from Dan. Anyone else of seeing Bryce Huff mock trades? Got to get him under contract first, and if he's under contract, we ain't trading him, period. Dan, I will say, Douglas has said this as well, they are not franchise tagging him. They are not franchising him. And if they're not franchising him, that means he is either walking in free agency and you're getting probably a 3rd or 4th round pick compensatory for 2025, or you lock him up to a long-term deal and then it's a moot point. But the one thing that I'll say about Bryce Huff and about where the Jets are on the defense, they are in a position, as terrible as this may sound, they are in a position to allow him to walk. They are. I mentioned this already with CJ Mosley in an article I wrote 2 days ago. CJ Mosley's cap hit is the highest on the team. The value that Mosley brings as a leader is great, but is it great enough to pay a position that isn't valued anymore across the NFL the most on the roster? That's why I say he either needs to have a contract restructure or he needs to be a post-June 1st cut. Rework the deal and bring him back, because you cannot pay him $21 million this year when you have other issues all across the roster. You need to save as much money as possible. And if the Jets come out there and say, Huff is too much for our blood, it's too much money, we wish him the best, then they have money now to spend on offensive linemen. If they were to let Bryce Huff walk and the Jets were to sign both Kevin Zeitler and Dotson, the guard from Los Angeles, sign them both, do we think of the Jets better than when Bryce Huff was here? The answer to that question is absolutely. Absolutely. Because you have depth on the defensive line already. John Franklin Myers is still under contract. Will McDonald, I'm very high on him. I like what I saw this year. These guys are available, and there's plenty of depth on the line already. You don't have to overspend for a player like Huff, because you can use that money at other more important positions. Dane, do you think we can hit the cap ceiling without re-signing Huff? That determination will tell me a lot. I don't think that's going to be the case. No, the thing that I will say that some teams fall into the trap of is when you have homegrown talent, you kind of try to overpay for that talent. The one comparison I had was a couple of years ago in 2022. Philadelphia was in the midst of a semi-decent season, and some of their top players, Avonte Maddox, Dallas Goedert, and Jordan Mailata, were all set to hit free agency the year after. And Philadelphia agreed to an extension for all three, roughly around the same time. But they agreed to extensions before the market was dictated. And it allowed them to sort of underpay for players instead of overpay. The problem that the Jets had is if they wanted to keep Bryce Huff, they needed to do it last offseason. Because now you're in a position where, yes, your depth is perfectly fine, but you're not going to have enough money to keep him and solve all the issues on the offense. You got to be able to choose a couple of different things. And they might even be able to have a chance to keep all of them if Huff's contract is not what he wants, but that's still a big question. From Wild Wave, I didn't see the press conference, but did anyone ask about Rex Hogan and Chad Alexander losing your left and right hand man is a big deal, especially since the draft is around the corner. Who replaces them? So Joe Douglas did get asked this question. And I saw a couple people on Twitter angry because they didn't hear any of the beat guys commenting about it. Joe Douglas was asked and did answer a question in regards to both. First off, and I will address this, If people were concerned about Rex Hogan being the leak, Joe Douglas, it doesn't sound like he is, because Douglas openly said Hogan is going to have offers elsewhere. Just because he's not right now doesn't mean that he's not going to have additional offers soon. And I'm going to help him get those offers. He was adamant in that he was going to help Hogan find a new role elsewhere. And with Alexander, he also mentioned this is a prime opportunity for him. We weren't going to stop him. It's an excellent move, an excellent promotion. He did mention that the scouting department has been very busy to sort of make up for the losses in the organization, in the front office. But he has been very impressed with the scouting department overall. So I don't know, and he didn't really mention if replacements were going to be made just yet. But as of right now, they are still moving ahead as if everything's the same. So to answer your question, he did answer questions about Hogan and Alexander. He did not give an inkling on who will be replacing them, but he has been impressed with what the scouting department has put forth since those two have left over the last couple of weeks. From Dana, we sure that Hardman wasn't given permission to speak to other franchises beforehand? Want to make sure before spreading this news. So again, it's not so much that I'm pretending that this is going on. Joe Douglas said it. Joe Douglas openly said it resonated with the team, that he openly stated to the Kansas City Chiefs, come and get me. It's not me pretending that Douglas didn't say it or pretending that Hardman didn't say it. The Jets were surprised that he did, because it clearly shows something else was going on. It clearly shows something else was going on. Douglas said as much. So yes, based on the law of the land from the NFL, if another team is contacting you, or a player on your organization is contacting another team, that is tampering. It's 100% tampering. It's right there for the taking. From Jared, have there been any rumors floating regarding how we are going to solve our lack of receiver talent? No rumors just yet. I know receiver is a vital importance to the Jets this offseason. They are very much interested in trying to solve this issue. I don't know exactly who they're going to target, because right now you're kind of seeing the wide receiver market dwindle. T. Higgins has been franchise tagged. Mike Evans and the Bucks are in negotiations for a long-term deal, so he could be off the market. The big guy, of course, now is Calvin Ridley. Ridley is a solid number 2 receiver. He's not a number 1. He is going to be paid number 1 receiver money this year, simply because he is the best wide receiver on the open market. And some of these teams, these playoff contending teams that have needs at receiver, are going to overspend for Calvin Ridley. Very, very similar to Christian Kirk signing his mega extension with the Jacksonville Jaguars a few years ago. It's almost a similar conversation. Kirk was one of the best receivers of his market. He got a massive deal, and he's actually lived up to that contract. But if I'm the Jets and I look at Calvin Ridley, and Ridley's in negotiations with other teams about number 1 receiver money, you know what I do? I give it to him. You don't have a number 2 receiver. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was just released by the Kansas City Chiefs. Everyone can look and say, well, he's got a relationship with Aaron Rodgers. That makes a lot of sense. But if you're talking about improving the team, a receiving core with Garrett Wilson and Calvin Ridley, with the tight end room that the Jets have, and Breece Hall out of the backfield, that's a really solid receiving core. Because you already have a number 1. You're just looking for the second guy. You're just looking for that number 2 guy. And they could find that in Ridley. There are other names as well. I like Hollywood Brown. He's got some injury concerns. He may want to go back to Baltimore, but that's certainly an option. Odell Beckham Jr. could be an option. You just slam the horn on number 3 wide receivers and hope any of them can produce on a weekly basis. All these guys are going to be in contention for those conversations. But the top guy is Calvin Ridley. And if I'm the Jets, I give him what he wants. Because you have to. You have to. You don't have an option. You don't have the option. Going through everything. I'm trying to answer all your questions. Well, Snowball, the best way to prove tampering is if you have video evidence of it taking place or video evidence of a person on one of the sides openly stating that tampering was going on, which further proves the stupidity, the mind-boggling stupidity that McCole Hardman did with this conversation. Him stating, I told the Chiefs, come and get me, while he was under contract with the New York Jets, and while saying, I was phoning it in at the end, man. I couldn't stand it anymore. That's tampering. And that's all the proof you need. I think this is all. I really believe, even with him denying on Twitter hours after, it's right there. And the Jets could probably get a trade with the Chiefs, acquiring another draft pick to end this, sure, but that's tampering. It's the letter of the law. It's right there. And he openly admitted it on video. It's not how do you prove it? It's he acknowledged it. He acknowledged it. From Red John, can Becton have a bounce back second year away from injury, 1 year deal? Red John, I actually love this idea. I love this idea because I am of the opinion that NFL fans now are a little too over the top. And I'm going to make my point here in a second. When you have and you talk to any doctor, any medical practitioner who says and has gone through surgeries and has talked to people who have been dealing with major surgeries, it is not a 1 year rehab. It takes a full year just to get back to 100%. So if we're judging Mekhi Becton's 2023 season on the kind of player everyone's hoping for, we are not properly understanding the injuries that he sustained. And it's not fair to him. He needs that second year to get back to 100%. And I think there is some argument to be made that Mekhi Becton, 2 years removed from knee surgery, will be better prepared for the full season of the NFL than his previous year, the first year he came back after a 2-year miss. And again, I'm not saying that fans should not have expectations for first-round players. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is when it comes to injured players, we are over the top. Because it takes 2 full years to get back to 100%. And there are outliers. There are absolutely outliers. Adrian Peterson being one of them. Breece Hall being another one. He had a tremendous year coming off of ACL surgery. But Breece Hall's at 100% now. Fully at 100%. He can have an NFL offseason preparing for the year. He's not going to be on some snap count to begin the season. He's in line for a massive year. You want to talk about an underdog player that can win Offensive Player of the Year? You hammer in Breece Hall. Absolutely hammering. So, yeah, I think a bounce back year from Mekhi absolutely can happen. I'm not saying to expect it. but he looks better. He's gotten into shape. The issue of 2023 was that he never had a set position. And also, in fairness, it was his first year back from a 2-year hiatus. That's very difficult to come back and just magically look like a dominant player. Remember, this wasn't Breece Hall coming back from ACL surgery last year. He missed 2 full seasons. That's very, very difficult to do. Very, very difficult. So I think some of the questions and the concerns about Mekhi are sometimes unfair to him. I really do, because at times this year, he looked pretty damn good. He looked pretty damn good. And a player that the Jets could absolutely consider keeping going into this offseason. But then what happened? He hurts his ankle, and he doesn't look like the same player. And that's why I said Becton should sit, because he has now tanked his market, and now no one knows what's going to happen, because he was not good at all after the ankle injury. But again, context needs to be added. First full year, playing at the NFL level. He looked really good when he was at 100%. It's just he got hurt, and late in the year, he struggled. As would most people when you're playing hurt. It's really that simple. It really is that simple. Funny comment here from Snowball. Jeff's first-round pick would be nice. Yeah, listen, the Chiefs are going to have to give up Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, who else? Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid, all for tampering charges. In reality, what I would expect to happen is the Chiefs and Jets make a trade where the Jets acquire a higher draft pick and give the Chiefs a late-round pick, a sort of pick swap that facilitates the tampering charge. That would be my prediction that happens. That would be my prediction. Going through the comments here, guys. If you guys have any other additional comments you want to call in about what happened at the NFL Combine today. Obviously, a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. We've already talked about some of it. Talked about Elijah Vera Tucker, their free agent conversations that they're going to have with Bryce Huff. There's also the Zach Wilson mention from Joe Douglas today. He essentially said that he was allowing the quarterback to seek a trade. And I will say this, guys. I know a lot of people will throw Zach Wilson as one of the greatest draft busts of all time. And he's certainly in the conversation. But I am going to say that I think Jamarcus Russell and Ryan Leaf were considerably worse. Considerably worse. Zach Wilson has had some games where he looked really good. The Texans game being one of them. The Texans game being a clear barometer of how good he can be. We never saw that with Jamarcus Russell. We never saw that with Ryan Leaf. So in fairness, I'm not going to call him the worst draft bust of all time. I'm going to go with the number one pick for the Oakland Raiders, who stunted the growth of that team for a decade. That is a bust. Another question from Antonio. What is Salah's infatuation with Keith Carter? I will say I'm not entirely sure. I thought going into the offseason that if there was going to be a coach that was going to be replaced, it would have been Carter. But I know that Douglas wants to have faith in his coaching staff, and he wants to give them second chances and all this other stuff. Notice the offensive staff that has left has mostly left for promotions elsewhere, or just wanting to leave the organization for new opportunities. So it's not so much that they only wanted to keep Keith Carter and everyone else was going to leave, because that's what it kind of looks like now, but that wasn't the case. They were fully anticipating, with Aaron Rodgers healthy, this staff is good, and we're going to give our staff a second chance. just like we have a second chance here. So I think it's not so much an infatuation. I think it's more, okay, we understand this year, really rotten luck. We're going to be okay regardless, and we're going to bring the staff back as a whole. And then some guys just wanted new opportunities. And when you're an organization, a well run organization, you want to give those guys new opportunities. You don't want to block teams from interviewing these positions. From Lake Jet fan, what's your new job, Nick? That's a great question. I'm pretty much writing for like 4 different pieces right now. I have part-time gigs with Sports Illustrated. I cover the Jets on Sports Illustrated. I cover the Ravens a little bit on Sports Illustrated. And I just recently had a part-time gig open up as a sports reporter for Pro Football Network. So you'll be seeing a lot of national and Philadelphia Eagles stories coming from me out of there. And I know you guys don't like it when I tweet out non-Jet stories, but I got to make a living here. I gotta do something. I got to get a full-time job. So the push is to get a full-time job and show that I can cover every team and not just one. So appreciate all of you guys that still watch and still follow along. It's all appreciated. Daniel with a comment here. I don't know if Douglas was somber per se. I got more of a pissed off, motivated vibe. I got that too. I got that as a more of, this is business. We're here for business, and I'm here to talk business. He didn't really get asked questions regarding the anonymous reports, and I don't think he would have answered it. I think it was mostly all about business. I truly believe there comes a time with general managers where you have the ass in the fire and you have to go and figure out what your principles are. And you have to change what your principles are at times. And I saw it with Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman did it in 2021. After the 2020 season, he was on the hot seat. And it was made abundantly clear from Jeffrey Lurie that he was on the hot seat. And he comes forth with 2 of the best drafts Philadelphia has had in decades. He learned from those mistakes. I truly believe Woody Johnson has told Douglas, this is it for you. Either get it right or you're gone. Douglas understands that. He said he understands it today. But for him, you either have to learn from your mistakes or double down. He's not doubling down. I think he's truly learning from his mistakes. Another comment from Murphy. Connor Hughes mentioned the Jets were looking at Arthur Smith joining the staff, but then he got the Steeler OC job. Yeah, again, I've heard that as well. I heard they were interviewing a lot of guys to try to bring in for offensive assistants. I hear they're still looking at it. The offensive staff obviously is not solidified. So I will say that they're still looking, and they're still probably going to look, but it's going to come down to who's the right fit. So it's all kind of in flux right now. I know the Jets haven't announced their full assistant coaching staff yet, and there's a reason for that. I think they're still working on it. So we'll see. We'll see. Got a call in from Johnny. Johnny, how's everything going, man?
Hanging in there. So much excitement, right? We finally got something. That's how crazy the offseason is, how bad it's been so far, right? But hey, dude, to me, man, with everything that's been said, like, I don't know why people were like saying that Douglas looked all depressed and he was just like sad. And I'm like, it's vintage Joe Douglas, right? He's not going to give you anything that, he plays everything very close to the hip, right? If anything, he kind of gave you, I mean, at least for me, I think we're going to sign Huff, right? I mean, he finally didn't come out and say, we want to make him a New York Jet for life. I don't know if you remember, he was infamous for saying that, right?
I think that was before my time.
He was. He used to always say that crap. And then out of nowhere, you would see they're gone. But the other thing that I think for myself, because I think you've been very vocal in stating that, that the culture is fine. Like, there's no real, like, anything. And I think we're starting to see that with this whole McCall Hardman piece, more of a sour apple type of thing. And you're seeing, like, captains, right? Like your Morstead, people that are very, very high character individuals that know that the coach is not going to come out, that JD's not going to come out, but they're going to come out and defend their staff and say, well, why don't we talk about this? The fact that what Saul said so we're not going to talk about you giving out the Philly special information.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you right here. I'm not going to have any comment about McCole Hardman shipping off secrets to Philadelphia and Philadelphia still blowing it. Not going to talk about it. Not going to get angry about it. Let's move on to the next point.
but I just feel like I think JD knows that that playoff mandate, it's a must. I think he knows that we're playing with all the chips, and the chips are being put right into the middle of the pot, that he knows he needs to hit big and hit big fast as well. He looked very like, I got all these interviews coming on. I mean, the fact that Salah's going to be there this weekend, I think it's huge. I think it needs to be there so everybody can kind of like talk about what's going to go on. So it's an exciting. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it's good. And Aaron Rodgers, there's reports of him looking insanely cut, supposedly, or whatnot. Like he's been working out very hard and everything. He's coming back with a chip on his shoulder, man. And he is the offense. And I don't know, man. I got a good feeling of good things coming. So we'll see, man. I just wanted to go ahead. I know I got on late, man. I've been busy as anything today with
I
work,
hear you.
but I always want to come in here and show some love. So what did you think, man? What's your take on all that?
I kind of agree with you. I didn't really think of anything. I saw Howie Roseman yesterday, and people were saying, "Oh, Roseman, he looks tired," and oh, Sirianni spoke right after. Oh, these issues, and I'm like, they're at the freaking combine. You want them to be doing jumping jacks? Like they're in the middle of conversations and trades and signings. Free agency starts in less than a month. This is busy season now. The football season ending is over. We are well smack dab in the middle of the 2024 offseason. To think that they're now working is, I think, wrong.
I just don't I like JD a lot, and I like that he's not out here like giving us false hopes of stuff and saying this or saying that. Like I trust him is what I'm trying to say. Like I believe in what he's gonna do, and I believe that it's not right now that everything is starting to look good. Did he fail us in the fact that he should have brought a quarterback to play backup? Yes, but I still believe that anybody that we would have had back there, it would have made no difference because
I
it
think
was
it would have made some. I think it would have made some.
not. But I don't think enough to. I mean, maybe one or two extra games.
Well, that gets
right?
you in the playoffs.
But
that gets you to the play like 8-9, 9-8. 9-8 gets you into the playoffs this year because that means you get some extra tiebreakers. You're involved in some of the conversations, and then you're competing with Pittsburgh for the final spot.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that that report came out too that Salah he got a B out of like a lot of the head coaches and everything, right? The fact that we had 7 wins with everything that occurred speaks volumes to me, at least, and it goes back to every single thing that you were saying throughout the entire season. Like you stood on your foot and said, no, this is like, I'm pounding the table. Like this is really what's going on. Like you guys need to start reading into the narratives or what other individuals and disgruntled people are saying. Like as a Jet fan, I don't think we're used to something being so organized that we have no idea what to do. So we're so battered, right? We're like the battered women syndrome type of thing that we don't know how to take good things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what JD brought in with that draft and what they're trying to go in and do, what Salah is trying to do. Because I mean, for the longest time, we were the laughing stock of the entire NFL, and we actually have people that want to come over to play for us. So it's over the Giants at that as well, which is sticking it to the Giants, which I try to do as much as I can, right? But I don't know. I'm excited, man. Like I think that press conference was huge. I'm glad he finally talked and kind of put the stuff out there. I mean, my guy was talking about The Rock, and Stone Cold was one of his favorite wrestlers back in the day, and somebody that grew up in that era, right? what more can you ask from your GM to say that? But
I mean, it was
appreciate you,
before
Nick,
my
man.
time, but
Dude, how old are you, bro? I thought you're like 52.
dude, come on. I'm jumping. I'm taking you off this call now. Jesus, 52. My God. Look, I know I'm fat. I know I'm balding. I'm not 52. I'm 27. I wasn't around for The Rock. I was around for like The Undertaker in his heyday, Edge in his heyday. Jeez, guys, making me look older than I am. Unbelievable. I'm gonna get to one final comment here before I log off today, and I think this is one that I agree with. Even Zach Rosenblatt said that Salah kept the team together throughout the season, and we kind of saw that as well with Tony Pauline with Sportskeeda, talking about the issues that the Jets have, and everyone wants to pile up. Everyone wants to pile up on what's going wrong with the team and the conniving issues with certain people in the organization that aren't happy with the way things are being run. And what people kind of forget is that this happens everywhere. Philadelphia can't go 2 freaking weeks without an anonymous source from a player or executive talking about how terrible the coaching staff is, how terrible the locker room is, and how terrible everything else is in the organization. And they went 11-6. 11-6. They had a horrific collapse. Horrific collapse. It's not as bad as people always make it out to be. And that's what I've been pounding the table on all year. So I appreciate Johnny for giving me my kudos there, but it's never as bad as you think. Joe Douglas, I've said this. Is he a bad GM? No. Is he a good GM? Not really. He's average. If I were to grade Robert Saleh, it's probably a little below average, right around, if you were going from a 0 to 100 scale, probably around like the 48, 49 range. But they've got something here. There's talent here. They just need to add enough pieces with that talent. And that's the last point that I'll make today, because Dane here is hurting my feelings. He was joking, not a day over 47. My God, guys. I shaved and everything. You're supposed to shave and look younger. Apparently, I shave and look like I'm going into AARP time. My God. My God. Oh, actually, you know what? We got one more call. Yeah, I'll stay on for a little bit, guys. We'll go on with BMAC. How's everything going, BMAC?
Hey, Nick. Yeah, as you know, I'm a Packer fan, but I adopted the Jets because AR8. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna, so as I'm, tuning in with my Packers, I'm gonna be tuning in with the Jets as well.
Mm-hmm.
You are one of the great we reporters. I've been watching you videos with Jake Assman, because I'm on that show too. I go on his show a lot, and you spew some knowledge on things. You know what I mean? Very like real perspective things about the team and about and I think you're one of the most positive people that talk about the Jets in a positive light. Most of the times when I see people talk about the Jets, it seems like more negative, like LOL Jets, same old Jets,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And no, they're not as lucky as most franchises. Like, I'm a Packer fan. Like, it looks like you about to head on 3 straight franchise great quarterbacks in a row. Hopefully, Joe Love picks out to
Mm-hmm.
going that way. But you know, this is a franchise that, look, when you're a team that's sucks so bad, no offense, but we're a team that's like 14 years with no playoffs, and like keep losing, and embarrassing things happen, like the butt fumble and the Fail Mary this past year. You know, it's kind of easy to get your jokes in and saying that the Jets are never going to be good, the Jets are never going to be this and that. But I do get like I do think next year. I do think the Jets will be in great shape next year because
Yeah.
you know you got the defense that's still going to be pretty good, even though they might be dressed a little bit. And I think the offense with Rodgers back, I think look, when we have Rodgers, he's way better than what I had last year with Simeon, Boyle, and Zach. So let's say if Rodgers if you get Rodgers from 2022, which it was quote unquote his downhill. I mean, would Jet fans would take that over what they had last year? Definitely. And with that kind of Rodgers, which I think he's going to be better than that, but with that, version of Rodgers, I mean, the Jets can still be win 10, 11, or 12 games. So
I appreciate it, B-Mac. B, thanks for the call. And I will say this. I meant to, I wanted to jump off 8 minutes ago. You guys have been just fantastic today. I will say this. The way things look right now for the Jets, if I were to give them a record for the 2024 season without free agency happening, I have them at 11-6. 11-6. Rodgers changes everything. Having a franchise quarterback is a 4-win difference for most teams. And Rodgers would get this team at 11-6 right now. Take it to the bank, 11-6. And I think they could be even better if they solidify the offensive line, bring in Calvin Ridley, get a backup. But this is a team that is absolutely capable of winning right now. You just need to add the other pieces. That's all it is. You are in a prime position where you can compete with the roster you have. You saw it. You saw it. You saw that they can compete with every top team in the NFL. Even without Aaron Rodgers, they were competing. And you're telling me that they would be worse with him? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. At all. I am going to end it here, though, guys. I got to make dinner. And I got to apply to some jobs as well. The grind never stops for someone like me. So apologize if you guys want to stay on. I will have another show on Friday. We're going to continue to do the Monday, Wednesday, Friday shows. Appreciate all of you guys for jumping on today. This was a fantastic show. We'll get through some of the big combine takeaways. That starts tomorrow. Just remember, though, Friday at 5 is when our show will be on. Thanks so much, guys, for jumping on. And I will see you all in a couple days.